Namaste this Christmas Day, beloved Sangha, beloved listeners. Welcome to the Advaita Channel. I'm Bhagavati, and this evening I'm reading part 2 from Adyashanti's Resurrecting Jesus. But first, while the opportunity arises for a few more people to join with us, I'm going to play a short piece from Muji. If anyone has any problems with AV, if you can let me know. Thank you. Namaste Atma, Namaste Dinam.
Beloved Father, who dwells within the soul of my being, whose name is I Am. Veneration to your holy name. Thy kingdom is here. Thy will prevails throughout the earth, as it does in the heavenly realms of my soul. You open your hands and satisfy the hunger of all living beings. You heal all hearts of sorrow, so that they in turn may show forgiveness to those whose minds are shrouded in ignorance of the self. Beloved Mother, who imparts to all the sense of choice, so we may finally come to choose you who are truth, and thus find everlasting freedom. Glory to your name, O truth. For yours is the kingdom of existence, of peace and love. All power and glory emanates from you alone, who imparts to all the wisdom, light, love and courage to refer to themselves as I am. Amen. Om.
So, welcome all. So beautiful to share this with you this evening. Evening for me. I chose to read from Adyashanti Resurrecting Jesus over the Christmas period because it just came to me this way. It just came. I'm not a great celebrator of Christmas myself, not because I'm against it, but because I just like to spend time in contemplation with the spirit of what the root of this celebration is about, the birth of Jesus Christ. I'm not a Christian, but I was born into a Christian family. I was brought up as a Catholic. I was educated in a Catholic school. And I come from a whole string of ordained Catholics, a bishop, a number of monks and nuns in the generations before me. So very much a strong connection with Jesus Christ in that respect. And my own experience was that I remained a Catholic until I was 19 and independent, moved away from home. And one day in a church I sat and I listened to a preacher in the pulpit, waving his finger, telling me how I should behave, what I should do. And it didn't resonate. It wasn't true. And I walked out, never to return to that path again. Now I have such dear memories of all that upbringing, and I return to churches very often, only this week. I meditate and contemplate in these spaces, these spiritual spaces, the energy around the prayer and the passion of those who practice there. And for me, at that same time as I left that church, I came to Zen Buddhism, which was 30 years ago now. And it was that path that led me here today, to be reading this to you on the Advaita Channel, through connecting with Muji. And all of it is right, and all of it is true. And it's such a perfect story of an awakening and of the benefit that can come to so many through just one single being. So when I came across this book from Adyashanti, there was very much similarity between our backgrounds, the way we came to this position now. And so much joy. And so I began this story this morning, and strangely enough, the recording clipped at 20 minutes. So for those that missed this morning, you haven't missed so much, because I'm picking up the reading again. Although I did read for an hour, I'm picking it up at the point where the recording left off. This is the point where Adyashanti has found a Zen teacher. And in this book he's sharing his understanding of the awakened, enlightened nature of Jesus Christ, of the nature of Jesus Christ as a Christian mystic. Not as a Christian, not as leader of a church, but as a being not so very different from ourselves. Let's read. I found a Zen teacher in a directory, one who happened to be actually only 15 minutes from where I grew up, which was amazing, because at the time there were very few Zen centers or temples in the United States. Her name was Adyashanti, and she had gone through training with her own teachers for a long time. She actually taught out of her house. I was about 20 years old when I found her, and I studied and meditated with her for more than a decade. Eventually, when I was 33, she asked me to teach. Zen training is really focused on what you do. In other words, how you engage in a real practice that can open you up to the deeper dimensions. the deeper realities of the mystery of all of us. And so I was engaging in Zen and doing a lot of meditation. Sitting in silence was the primary practice, and it was a profoundly meaningful experience for me. It was really the avenue through which I engaged my spiritual search. But as the years went on, there was something in the practice of Zen that I couldn't find a connection with. It started to feel a bit dry. I know this feeling myself. I feel this is how I came to Advaita, to Guruji. Something felt tight like a straitjacket. It felt dry. It felt like the heart of it was missing. There was something missing. I didn't feel deeply engaged on an emotional level. And so, without being really conscious of what I was doing, but just following my interest and intuition, I started to reach out again, especially through my reading. One day, I found myself in a tiny spiritual bookstore in Palo Alto, California, where I found the autobiography of Sainte Thérèse de Lisieux. Saint Therese was a 19th century Catholic nun who died very young. During the last years of her life, her Mother Superior asked her to write down her life's story. Thumbing through her autobiography in the store, something about her saintly piety just intrigued me. So I bought the book and took it home. As I read her life story, I was so taken by her. There was an innocence and a dedication to God that really touched something in me. Her relationship with God was very sincere and very simple. And something about the simplicity and sincerity of her approach touched something that was very sincere and simple in me. And much to my surprise, I found myself quite literally falling in love with this saint, who was long dead. And when I say I fell in love with her, I mean I really fell in love with her. Like when you get a crush in high school and you're completely preoccupied with someone. I read 3 or 4 different versions of her autobiography. I read commentaries on her life and her writings. And I was completely swept up with her for about 2 years in this love affair of the heart. I was caught so off guard by this experience, and it was so unexpected that I didn't really know what to do with it. What was really happening was that my heart was being opened. There was something in the way she conveyed her real love of God that was deeply heart-centered, and it broke my heart wide open. This was the beginning of discovering within myself what I think of as the transmission of Christianity and of the Jesus story, which is the transmission of the love of the Sacred Heart, of the deep, open, unguarded intimacy of love. I continued my Zen Buddhist practice, seeing my teacher, doing my meditation, but with my heart blown wide open. It was such a different experience than before. That love was the missing element that I hadn't found in my Zen practice. And of course, looking back, I see it was there. It just wasn't there in a way that I could connect with. That makes good sense, of course, because I didn't grow up in a Buddhist culture. So it wasn't easy for me to connect with their icons, images, and stories. They're a little alien to me. Zen, for me, was about engaging in spiritual practice as a serious, in-depth investigation. But through the Jesus story and through Saint Therese, I started to experience the heart of sacred love. She was the doorway through which I walked deeper into the truth at the core of Christianity. In my own case, it was indeed coming to Guruji that brought both this blowing wide open of the heart and this sacred love, the passion for the Christ story again. Such a wonderful gift to receive in the midst of all that dry Zen. It's a very good description that Adyashanti gives us there. This is how I love you, and how you shall love all things. Not long after my encounter with Saint Therese, I had a profound experience while at a Zen retreat. Zen retreats are very strenuous, with as many as 15 40-minute periods of meditation each day. So it required a lot of silent sitting, a lot of being in quiet. I had been to Zen retreats before, and had just begun to think I was getting good at it when I showed up at this 7-day retreat. I was really looking forward to being there. But as the retreat unfolded, something started to go haywire. It began to turn into a nightmare. I felt an intense sense of discomfort, and I had no idea why it was happening. I felt a feeling of profound confinement, like a caged animal, and I wanted to break out. Another of Adyashanti's experiences that this one knows all too well. Very powerful experience indeed. Now, by that time, I knew how to sit in meditation through all sorts of different states of mind and emotions. and I had long since realised sometimes you just have to sit through these discomforts. But this really had me stumped. I was so profoundly, emotionally uncomfortable, with intense anxiety and fight or flight symptoms going on inside me. At a certain point, I literally couldn't take it anymore. I just cracked. It was devastating for me. I felt humiliated in a very profound way. And so I wrote a little note to say that I was leaving. And when everybody else was meditating, I tacked it up onto the teacher's door. You weren't supposed to leave without seeing the teacher in person. But I was so humiliated that I just couldn't face him. I left the note and got in my car and drove home. I was so devastated that I really thought that this was the end of my quest. I thought to myself, well, you gave it a good 5 or 6 years. You really put yourself all into it, but you failed. You're not cut out for this. Throw in the towel. I was 25 years old, and I was certain, absolutely certain, that that was the end of my spiritual search. So I drove home, thinking it was all over. But when I pulled up at the house, a little voice in my head said, just go right through the front door and out the back. Sit down in your meditation hut and meditate. I'd learned to trust that still, small voice in my head over the years. It didn't make any sense to me, because I was sure that this was the end of my spiritual search, that it was all over, but I just did what the voice said. I literally walked from the car, in the front door, straight through the house, to the back door, and into my meditation hut. No sooner did I sit down than that spiritual heart, the heart of love I'd first experienced reading Saint Therese, literally exploded. It wouldn't even be true to say it expanded. It was like an explosion in my chest. I went from a state of despondency, certain that my whole spiritual search was over, and I had failed, to this immensity of love, of a well-being beyond anything I had ever experienced. And then I heard these words in my mind, as if the God of the Bible was talking, and the voice said, "This is how I love you, and this is how you shall love all beings and all things." It literally felt like the voice of God, and that explosion of the heart changed everything. That night, the teacher from the Zen temple called me up and asked, "So what happened?" I said, "I don't know." I love that he doesn't know. I love that he doesn't know that. How could he know anything in this experience? Wow. Atma here says, wow. Beautiful. Kapil, beautiful. I feel this the whole experience. I feel so energetically just reading this for the second time today. So, what happened? I don't know. The teacher from the Zen temple asked, "Why don't you come back?" And I said, "Okay, I'll be back tomorrow." And that was the end of the conversation. It was literally that fast, because I didn't have any reservations about going back. I didn't necessarily feel that my spiritual life was back on track. But in this immensity of love that I'd experienced, I felt like a feather in the wind. Come back? Okay, I'll go back. So I drove back to the temple. And as I was about to enter the meditation hall, I saw the retreat leader, the one who holds people to the rules. At the door of the hall, this monk looked me straight in the eyes and said, "You shouldn't have left, and you shouldn't have come back." And you know, those were the best words he ever could have said. Because I saw that when he spoke, nothing in me budged. That love didn't shrink, didn't diminish, didn't move one iota. In fact, I wanted to throw my arms around him and kiss him, because he showed me that nothing could budge what I was experiencing. Oh, joy. If I hadn't had that open heart and someone had said, "You shouldn't have left and you shouldn't have come back," I would have been devastated. Instead, the effect that it had was simply to show me the immensity and the intensity of the love I was experiencing. I walked right back in that door, and I had a wonderful retreat. And so, what began with this Christian saint opening my heart in a totally unexpected way really culminated in this blasting open of the heart in a moment of great despair. Great despair. Anyone listening to this, watching, if you're experiencing great despair right now, remember that. Remember that. What does Mooji tell us? Our darkest hour. That our darkest hour comes just before the dawn. Because right when the light's going to break through, our mind is going to cause us such suffering. Once again, the Jesus story and this saint, so intimately connected with the Jesus story, played a pivotal part in my life. It was at this point that I began to read an immense amount on Christian mysticism. As many as 200 books of the Christian mystics. I've told people since that I came to understand Zen through Christian mysticism, and in a way, it's true. Let us not forget that it was the meeting of a Christian mystic that brought about Guruji's first breakthrough awakening. When Guruji asked him to pray with him. There's such power in this, beyond anything we can imagine or understand in a worldly way. So, through Christianity, I really started to get a deeper understanding of what Zen was all about. Conversely, my Zen Buddhist practice and all my time in meditation helped me realize what the Christian mystics were saying. So they really went together for me at that time. Through my reading, I also got a deeper feeling for the story of Jesus, both who he was and what the Jesus story meant to different people. In reading the mystics, I realized that the truth and the love of Christ meant different things for different people. Different mystics had very different takes on the relationship between Jesus and God, on their relationship with God, and on their relationship with Jesus. I felt as if I'd walked into a mysterious world. As a child, I was always intrigued with the Jesus story in a very powerful way. My imagination was captured by it. But when I stepped into the world of these ancient Christian mystics, I started to look at the story of Jesus in a completely different light. They showed me that the Jesus story could actually tell you something really important about yourself. How you relate to life, and how you relate to the fundamental mystery of being. For each of us, our own existence is a very mysterious thing. Simply to be, to exist, is a great mystery. On the surface, we each have a personality, a persona, an ego structure, the way we present ourselves to the world. But inside of us is something quite different. Now, in my 20s, I'd gone to college and studied psychology and sociology. So initially I thought of what was inside in psychological terms. Then, through my study of Zen, I realized that there was a dimension of being that was far beyond what we could think of as our own personal psychology. Finally, when I encountered those Christian mystics, it's as if they pulled me into a more creative place, toward a meeting place where the story of Jesus came together with the creative power of the unconscious. That's a very powerful dynamic. When the mystery of our own being meets a really extraordinary story, that meeting can elicit something quite transformative. The Christ presence. So here I was with this big open heart, studying the Christian mystics. I was taken not only with their words, but also with what my reading was waking up within me. A certain presence or vitality was awakened in me. A distinct and profound presence that belongs to the Christian tradition as a whole. In Europe, all you have to do is walk through the doors of those old churches, and you immediately feel a distinct transmission, very different from the transmission of Buddhism or Hinduism or Islam or any other religion. Of course, each religion does have its own transmission, its own presence. It comes from the founder of the religion, from their essence, and from the hundreds, or in the case of Christianity, the thousands of years different people relating to that core story. When we open to this Christ presence, it can evoke an inner sense of vitality and of boundless love. As I delved deeper into these Christian mystics, I was beginning to question in my own mind if I needed to make a path change from Zen Buddhism to Christianity. It had been many years since I had been to my first Catholic Mass, and I decided to go back a second time. This time, I knew I wasn't supposed to partake of the communion. So when everyone else got up, I just sat in the back and watched. Even in watching, I found that there's a certain profound mystery about that ritual that is very hard to convey in words. Any powerful religious ritual will have this quality of touching something very deep and very ancient within us. A good ritual is meant to evoke the mystery of being. The mystery of our own existence. The mystery of life. The mystery of God. It's meant to evoke that sense of eternity that shines through the latticework of time and space. That's really what ritual is for. To put us in touch with that sense of eternity, with the sense of the sacred. And so I was sitting in the back of the church and watching people go through the communion. Reading the mystics, who wrote so eloquently about their own profound experiences, I had felt a deep sense of connection, as if I'd reached back hundreds of years and connected with the living presence of another person. So I had an unconscious expectation that I was going to have the same feeling when I walked into this church and watched the Mass. But when the priests started to talk, it was extraordinarily disappointing. He talked about abortion, about how families should be, about intimate issues having to do with sexuality, and how you should live your life. And as he talked, I felt that he had taken the presence created by this ritual of communion and thrown it on the floor and stepped on it. I had a sense that he had completely missed the Christian message. He was more interested in modifying people's intimate behaviour and in espousing certain political views than he was with a priest's primary job, which is to open us to the mystery, to make the Jesus story transparent, to the transcendent presence that it evokes. As I listened to this priest, all the presence and mystery disappeared from the room and everything returned to the relative world. That was the moment when I realized, okay, I guess this Christian path isn't going to be my chosen path. I wanted something really deep, and I could find it in the ancient mystics, but I couldn't find it in a living modern church. But even though I knew that Christianity wasn't going to be my primary path, I also realized that the whole story of Jesus and the transmission of Christianity would continue to play an important part in my own spiritual development. My Zen meditation had gotten me to a certain point, but I needed the spiritual heart to flower so that I could keep going and not stall out. The Christian transmission has informed my whole spiritual path, and in a way, it has informed my whole life. This is the end of chapter 1. I was going to continue and read a little more, but I feel to stop here so we can just take it in. Those of you that missed the first part of this reading, Adyashanti was presenting us with this story so that we could find our own perspective, that we could become part of this Jesus story, that we could take this understanding to our heart. That it can be our story, that it is our story. And this Christ presence, this heart of love, this sacred heart, I know so many of us know so well already. And those who don't and worry that this won't come or this should come, don't worry. Just don't worry. I know for me when this came, I just snuck up and poof, it just came. Just came. Nothing to do, nothing to wait for. No practice needed. All the practice was for the past, to get us to this place now. And here we sit together. So grateful for this day, so grateful for this opportunity to share this beautiful story, to discover Christ the mystic, to share it with others. So much joy in it, so much love in it. So tomorrow I'll continue and read the Jesus of the Gospels. And I can't resist reading you the introductory quote before we finish, which will be with the beloved prayer from Guruji. And the introductory quote is, Jesus said, I have cast fire upon the world, and see, I am guarding it until it blazes. We know this fire. Our hearts are in this fire. Our hearts are on fire. This is a sacred fire. This is the fire of the Holy Spirit that Mujiji prays so often to come alight and alive in all our hearts, and the light for us to share with the world, this fire. I have cast fire upon the world, and see, I am guarding it until it blazes. From the Gospel of Thomas, a Christian mystic. Let's give our beloved Guruji the final word.
Beloved, all that you perceive is transient, is passing. But you are the unchanging one, timeless and perfect. Rid yourself of all delusions and come lay down here in the silence of being. For unlike time, you are not passing. You are the formless within all forms, the silence and stillness inside all movements of time and manifestation. Arise into the fullness of your real nature as the unchanging self, the goal and source of all being. Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya.
Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Shri Satguru Jesus Christ Ki Jai. Om Shri Satguru Mujiji Ki Jai. Om Shri Satguru Anantaji Ki Jai. Sangha of Being Ki Jai. Om Namah Shivaya. I love you so much, all of you. Merry Christmas.